name is Ulka Anjaria. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Do you like
Great.
the new look?
I do like the new look. Very nice. Was
Yeah.
that a lockdown look?
Yes, it's my lockdown. This is my new macho look.
It
My
looks very
Pride Month
macho.
lockdown look.
Very nice. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you.
It's nice to
Um,
see you too.
yeah. What a world, huh? What a
I
world.
know. I know. We can talk about that, but I do want to talk about the book first.
Yes,
So, so we're here to celebrate, right? The second edition is
yes.
published of Gay Bombay. That's very exciting. Congratulations.
And thank you for writing the most incredible first chapter anyone could have asked for. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I love the book. You're very welcome. And I'm so happy to see it still alive and being
Yeah.
read by people. That's exciting. So the second edition though comes out much after the first and a lot has changed. So can you talk about writing a second edition, after 377 and all of that? I mean, it's a lot happened in those years.
Yeah, so yeah, of course, so much has changed, and welcome to everyone who's joining us. Thank you, Sujit. Thank you for all who are appreciating the hair. I feel very jealous seeing Ulka and her rich crop of hair. But
This is
hopefully,
my
it'll grow
lock.
back.
These are my lockdown locks. So yeah.
Of course. Um, so a lot has changed, and in fact, that was the impetus to do this second edition. So, Queeristan, the next book is coming out in August or September now,
Great.
sometime in one of those months. And so we were revisiting Gay Bombay, and we recognized, uh, so I think actually the impetus was, to be honest, reading about it in your book, Reading India Now. Over the years, the book has kind of, it was a small master's thesis that I wrote while at MIT. And I was lucky that Sage Publications wanted to even bring it out. And it kind of had its own life in the world, right? And, at different times, I've been embarrassed of it, uh, you know, proud of it occasionally, but it was kind of in my past. But reading about it with the love and affection with which you received it and the way you contextualize it as part of, the larger either queer writing, queer Indian writing, but also how one writes the city. Um, and, and over the years, whether it's how it appeared in your book, whether it's other professors who've been using it in their own academic work, whether it's emails that I still continue to get after 12 years of, mostly younger students telling me how they read the book and they found it extremely useful. So all of these kind of came together to say that maybe there should be a revised edition. Also, it had gone out of print and I wanted a copy. And it was like for some, 5,000 rupees or something on so, because, people who have them now are like, are selling them
Collector's
for,
items.
correct. So I was like, we need to bring out another edition. And, I touched base with Sage. Aarti is very much at Sage, who had published the book with so many years ago, thought it was a good idea. And then when we thought of the this edition, we said, what does it mean, right? Because as you yourself, or I think Kareem wrote, right? The book came out and then the 2009 verdict happened. And now the 2018 verdict has happened and this new edition comes out, right? Between these two, so much has changed. So I think a lot has changed. So the aim of this book was, in a sense, to talk a little bit about what has changed, whether it's the law, whether it's the way academic writing, etc., has expanded, which is why after your chapter, there's Kareem's chapter, and scholars like Kareem have built on Gay Bombay to advance their own scholarship. So to kind of catalog some of that, but also to recontextualize this book in today's time. And when I revisited it after so many years, we decided that we wouldn't change the text much. So it's not as much an updated edition. It's more of a condensed edition. So we've kind of chopped out 1/3 of the text So the book in itself now kind of exists between, opening chapters by scholars like you and Kareem, who contextualize the book, a new opening, as well as a closing conversation, which I think is fundamental, between me and Dhiren Borissa, who wrote this wonderful work while a PhD student at JNU and who now teaches at OP Jindal Global University, about the queer histories that we still need to write, in which we talk about the various dimensions of intersectionality. We talk about what's in the book, what the book very obviously leaves out, and things like that. So this new edition is kind of a recontextualization of the book, as much as, it's not like the text hasn't been updated as much.
Well, one of the things I liked about the book, even in the first edition, was that, and that's why I think it has that timeless quality. It's not only about Section 377 and the limitations that were felt by a lot of people, but the book is actually quite optimistic. I mean, even in the midst of that, when a lot of people didn't feel optimistic about any immediate change, and I don't mean optimistic just about immediate change, but the stories you tell, the dreams that people have in the interviews. I mean, it's all. And I think that's why it actually very much translates to the current day, because just because 377 is now gone, it doesn't mean that people don't continue to have dreams for a better kind of queer future.
Yeah, and I think we need that optimism now more than ever, because even today, whether it's COVID, whether it's just overall circumstances in our country and all over the world, there is a lot that one can feel overwhelmed by and helpless. So I think that optimism at the book's end, and certainly within the queer movement in India as well, we've seen over the past few years. I mean, I think it's, I think all movements should have various voices, and often when these voices don't always have to agree with each other in that sense. I think 377 was a useful kind of thing to rally around. And even then, there were a lot of people questioning, why 377 is something that one should rally around. I think now, once 377 is gone, this is another moment also for a queer movement, right? Will we rally around marriage like people have in other parts of the world? Will we, that would be good, but will we also use this moment to rally around issues that are important to all of us in the LGBTQ community? Are we honoring our trans sisters and brothers by speaking up against the oppressive Trans Act, which has just been passed last year, right? With as much fervor as, say, we were, saying down with 377. So I think this moment is a useful moment for us in the queer community and in the world at large to galvanize around. I've always looked at life, with the framework of glass half full. And while revisiting this book, I kind of also went back to the modus vivendi, which is the closing chapter of Gay Bombay, in which I talk about so many of the reasons why I believe that the movement can, I say, we don't all have to agree, but we can galvanize around, in coalition politics, a common minimum program. And we can learn from each other in multiple ways, and we can move ahead in creating, as you said, this maza-filled future, which is how you end, the new first chapter around it. And I think, and I hope that at this moment, readers, of the revised edition of Gay Bombay take comfort in it, draw inspiration from the optimism, and use it in an enabling manner.
Yeah, I think we do need that more than ever right now. I mean, class is another issue you talk about in the book, and you're very honest about the fact that, class isn't completely resolved. Class differences are not completely resolved. But again, not as a sense that, not as in a self-defeating way, but in a sense that this will continue to be a struggle, as you say, in terms of planning. You end up with some very practical things too, like not only looking to the West for possible queer futures, which I think is, again, one of the problems that has plagued queer LGBTQ movements everywhere outside the West. So I think that these are, and have you seen progress in some of these domains over the last decade?
Yeah, I see lots of progress. You know, but before this, there was a comment that a young queer activist, Arpit Bhala, passed away today, who was 23.
Mm.
And I just, you know, want to take this point to mourn Arpit's passing away. They were young, they were full of life. I met them just a couple of months ago at the Rainbow Lit Fest. So it feels very, very strange in the middle of all of this, right? But I think we must acknowledge that while we imagine better queer futures, there are so many queers at this moment all around us, who don't have very, you know, very positive or rosy presence. Uh, the present is very, very hard for a lot of queer people as well. So what does it take at this moment then to imagine this rosy queer future or a more positive queer future? And I talk about this in the beginning of the revised Gay Bombay, and also in depth in Queeristan, the next book. And I think where I choose to draw a lot of my inspiration from are young people, are people who are, you know, creating a multilingual, polyphonic, queer, you know, imagining this queer future to be truly, truly plural and intersectional. There are so many people. There's Sid, who is on this Insta Live from Boston, who runs something called Mardangi. And there are so many other. Sid has also joined Pink List recently. And there are so many other young queer activists in India and around the world who are all looking at various dimensions of how queerness intersects with other aspects of identity, and how queer rights intersect with other social justice movements, right? We're having this Insta Live at this point in the middle of, you know, a turning point in the Black Lives Matter movement, say in the US and other parts of the world, right? So what I draw inspiration from I draw inspiration from so many young, fierce, out and proud activists who are putting themselves out there, unpacking a lot of the stuff that, say, me and a lot of the older generation have tried to process, and really, really, really helping imagine a better tomorrow, right? There's Queer Muslim Project, there's Dalit Queer Project, there's Chinky Homo Project, there's Pink List India, which recently has done this, you know, it's grown from just a political list to a list that talks about queer politics, but which also looks at queer mental health and so many other resources. There's Trans Vision, which Rachna runs out of Andhra Pradesh, which is a YouTube channel dedicated completely to trans people. So there's so much stuff out there that at this moment I draw from, and that gives me hope, even at these difficult moments.
Yeah, no, two things I take from what you say. The first is, I mean, I agree with you. If you look around the world right now, it seems like we have such a massive failure of leadership in so many places. But what we do have is youth protest and youth voices that do give us a different kind of hope. So, I mean, on one hand, we have such massive failures, and on the other hand, such inspiring futures. So, I mean, it's a way to be kind of, to not feel helpless, to look at these voices. And the other thing that what you said reminded me of is just, and I think this is something we won't have solved the problem yet, but how to mourn. What is mourning going to look like in the context of all of these lives lost? It can't just be a generic mourning, as you say. People, there's particular tragedies to particular groups and people that have to be kept distinct. We can't just say, oh, we lost X number of lives because of COVID and leave it at that. We have to look at the differential ways in which, and I think that's what both in the US and in India, what happened, you know, over the past few months, we see that COVID is hurting different groups in different ways. And we will have to find some vocabulary in which to mourn specifically. I think Black Lives Matter is one of the most inspiring and powerful messages of that group, is really defining specifically why Black life matters. But I think you're right in terms of queer and trans lives that continue to be affected in disproportionate ways. So that seems to be part of the collective project that is going to have to come out of this this past few months everywhere is to develop a vocabulary and a way to mourn that preserves those specificities.
Yeah. And the other thing is going to be like, how do all of us who are in positions of power and privilege, how can we widen these spaces? One of the one of the inspiring quotes in terms of, you know, me writing Queeristan, the next book, is about when Divya Kandukuri, who spoke at our Culture Lab a couple of years ago, really urged all of us, because someone said, what can people with privilege do? Divya said, just amplify, pass on the mic, share. So I think with what can we do in academia, what can we do, at places, this is something that we've been thinking of at the Culture Lab, for example. How can we use the position or the place that we have to build resources? We wrote a white paper a couple of years ago for trans employment. In a small way, all the different people who are working on COVID, etc., we've kind of collected that and put that as a link on our website. But I think it's really, really in all of us widening our perspectives and making sure that in everything we do, we include and we amplify voices, and we platform a wide range of possible imaginations of the future of queerness.
Yeah, and Parmesh, you do that so well. I mean, one of the things in academia, we have this sense that we will amplify and share, as you say, but it has to be completely only in non-commodified and non-corporatized spaces. And one of the things that your work is teaching me is the importance of actually collaborating at times when it's possible with the corporate world to amplify in cases. So that's been something that I think you feel quite strongly about, right?
Yeah, but it's not easy. It's not easy. One is constantly negotiating. One is constantly explaining. One is constantly translating, and not just to the corporate world, but to everyone else, right? So the work that I do right now, I sit on multiple intersections. I have friends who are activists. I have friends who are artists, who are creative entrepreneurs. I have friends who are in business, in research, and so on, right? And a project of this kind of cross-pollination also means a lot of people have assumptions about other people. Many of these are right. Many of the assumptions are right. So what does it mean then to kind of be this constantly negotiating, constantly translating, constantly trying to say, but if you look at it from this lens, here's what we could do. And if it's not easy, it's exhausting. So at the end of most days, I'm super exhausted. But I think that's what I have realized in my work, that I have this opportunity because of either my education or, the multiple forms of privilege that I have to do this act of translation. And I think in this act of translation, again, you widen, you open doors, you widen doors you widen, horizons for everyone. So the work that I've been doing in the corporate world, I think, has been very useful. It complements a lot of the other work that so many other activists have been doing in terms of law, in terms of health, in terms of media, other kinds of outreach. I think it's useful because hopefully it can lead to more jobs, and that's what I care about right now, which is the link between Gay Bombay and Queeristan. And if you see both are written in the same deeply personal, deeply fragmented, pulling at different things, ending with a manifesto kind of template. And in Queeristan, I actually make the argument that hiring LGBTQ people is really, really good for corporations in so many ways. But of course, underlying that is my deep is my attempt at making sure that my queer brothers and sisters all over the world are employed. We get jobs. We enter positions of power in which we can then keep on furthering this work, right? Of creating more and more platforms. So it's a very interesting work that I'm doing right now, but it's a constant struggle. It's a constant tussle. A lot of the struggle is with other people outside, as I've told you, but a lot of the struggle is also inside. Because when you're so multi-hyphenated, you kind of, you're always in the hyphen and you kind of forget uh, where you started and where you're going and, what it all means. And I often tend to do that.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you say, it's true for people working in working to make legal battles, and there's all these domains in which you have to translate kind of activism or academic approaches to the real world in a way that forces you to be accountable, to be clear and have a vision, but also, as you say, can be very exhausting. And that's a lot of, I mean, that's work you're doing kind of on all of our behalf. So I think it's really important work, but it can burn you out, certainly. So Queeristan is, you said, coming out in a few months.
Yeah, it's coming out. It was supposed to be out around this time, but now it's going to be coming out in August, September.
That's great. And so is it the primary audience is corporate executives, or how do you pitch the book?
So I pitched the book actually to Kartika, my publisher, while in Kitty Sue, a nightclub in Delhi, while we were watching Maya, the drag queen from Bangalore, dance to Dreamum, Wake Upum, Critical Condition, which happens to be like a song that I love.
I love that song.
Yeah, me too, right? And I love that movie.
I love the movie.
So underrated and so beautiful. And that's what it was. It's a business book, and just the way it was pitched gives you an indication of what the book is. It's a business book, which is unlike any other business book that you might have read. I don't know if you read many business books, but
I haven't read many, no. Yeah. But I am looking forward to reading yours.
Yeah, because it's part diary, part, memoir, part manifesto, part guidebook. In a sense, building off Gay Bombay. So writing Gay Bombay and revising it and thinking about it kind of gave me the confidence to do this kind of book like Queeristan, which has queer history, but again, history pulled through from different ways, from mythology, but also from oral histories and lived lives and, different kinds of archives. It has queer terminology. It talks about the law in an interesting way, or the multiple laws that affect queer people. It talks about the importance of families. There's a whole chapter, which I think is my best chapter in the book. It's called, It's All About Loving Your Children. And this is a line, reversing Karan's line from Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gham, where the tagline was, it's all about loving your parents. And I'm kind of flipping that and saying, no, it's actually all about loving your queer children. And so it's got all of that, but it's also got lots of business, like why be inclusive and 6 steps you can take and things like that. So it's a Bollywood masala book. So of course we want everyone in business to read it and to be inspired by it and to change. But I think it's a book that, even the general public are going to, are going to enjoy. And at least in terms of all the previews and they had some very generous blurbs. People seem to have really, really liked both the personal as well as the pragmatic. Yeah.
That's great. I can't wait to read it. And I think, again, building off on some of I think both you say the pastiche type style you like writing in, I think is also, it makes it fun to read. People enjoy those breaks where you talk about your personal history or you have a quote from someone else. And I think it feels like you're reading something enjoyable like fiction, even though you're getting this important message. So that I'm glad you're doing that again.
It has less sex than Gay Bombay, though, I must
tell you. Oh, that's too bad.
It's a business book. I know, that's too bad.